Hey, it's Matt Lansadell. Welcome to the Inspired to Be Authentic YouTube channel where we talk about everything authenticity. My content is geared towards sensitives, empaths, and gay men, but it will serve all people looking to embrace more of their authentic self. So today we are talking about how to reparent your traumatized inner child. We're going to be talking all about reparenting, inner child work, and trauma. So this video is for you if you have experienced childhood trauma. Okay, that's going to be the first flag. Next one is going to be you self-abandon or you have a fear of abandonment. You often don't feel safe and don't trust people easily. You struggle with high levels of anxiety. You have a hard time feeling and expressing your emotions. You are a controlling person. Or you find yourself in codependent relationships. So these are going to be some top markers. If you identify yourself in those, stay tuned and watch this video because you will gain some things from it. So what will you gain from this video? Well, we're going to be talking about what is inner child work, what is reparenting, and what is trauma. And then exploring how trauma impacts us as children and why we need to move through this reparenting process. I'm going to be taking you guys through 18, yes, that's a lot of ways, but I have 18 ways that we can reparent ourselves, and I will ensure that the list is also copied and pasted down below in the caption to this video. So yeah, glad to have you here. Please subscribe if you are new to the channel. Click the button, you know what to do. Click the bell icon, you'll get notified when I release new videos each Wednesday. If you don't already follow me on Instagram, this is where you're going to find a lot of valuable content, written content, and easy bite-sized pieces of a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about in my videos. And you can find me over there at Inspired to Be Authentic. Again, the link is going to be down in my link tree in the caption to this video. You can also find me on Patreon. This channel is viewer supported, so if it resonates with you, please consider supporting me on Patreon so I can continue to create quality content for you to consume. All right, so let's jump right in to today's topic. So let's start out by talking a bit about what is the inner child. Essentially, the inner child is this part of us that is either been wounded, right? It's a wounded part of us. It's the innocence of us. It's the playfulness in us. It's this childlike energy that we embody. We can still embody it today, but oftentimes what happens is when we have some sort of childhood trauma or some sort of childhood experience, adverse experience, we end up splitting from ourselves, and we leave parts of us in the past as parts of us move forward. And so essentially the inner child is these unintegrated memories or concepts that we had of ourselves when we were children, and they're back there, right? They're back there, and we need to bring them forward. This is inner child work. We need to bring them forward, we need to work with them, and we need to create safety in the present moment. And this is what moving through the process called reparenting, right? So we're looking at reparenting being becoming our own supportive ally and offering ourselves the safety that we never received as children in the present. Okay, so reparenting is becoming your own supportive ally in your healing journey. We all have experiences in childhood. Regardless of how great our parents were, we all have experiences that we could consider adverse or traumatic, and it's our responsibility now as adults to take care of that trauma and to take care of the wounding that needs to be addressed. So this is essentially offering ourselves what we did not receive from others, specifically our parent figures, and learning how to meet those needs now. This is a big part of the reparenting process. So reparenting essentially leads to a restoration of trust and safety for us, and I think that's a really important aspect of being a happy and healthy adult, is feeling like you can trust not only yourself but the world around you, and the people in it, and then that through that trust we find we have a sense of safety. So this is going to be essential in this work. If you're finding that you don't trust and you don't feel safe because of your past trauma, then we want to make sure that we're moving through this reparenting process, which is what I'm going to be teaching you guys today. So I'm glad you're here. Okay, so let's talk a bit about trauma, because I think a lot of people frame trauma in the sense of it being like a life-threatening event, or rape, or a massive car accident where you almost lost your life. Like any of these sorts of things, we think those are traumatic, and we think all the other stuff is not, right? So the bullying, the neglect, the emotional abuse, the abandonment, these are all just a different form of trauma, right? And it's not less valid. It can affect us in a deep and profound way, and this is some of the healing that we need to be focusing on, is what is called attachment trauma, right? So I'll define trauma for you guys. It is a lasting emotional response to an adverse experience that caused us distress. Okay. The way I define it for myself would be it's essentially unprocessed emotions or memories that are stored in the body, and they deeply impact the nervous system in our body, and our ability to be able to regulate our emotions. So those are going to be the two fundamental things you're going to see in somebody who's traumatized, is they have a dysregulation of their emotional world and their nervous system. So we need to really, as we move through the reparenting process, we need to learn about our trauma, we need to learn about our nervous system, so we can start to do the healing work and tending to ourselves in these really unique ways, to help process some of this emotional debris, or these memories that we have split from, right? And once we bring those into the present, we process them, we let ourselves feel and reconnect again, then we can heal trauma, okay? So attachment trauma is a distressing or harmful experience that affects a person's ability to form healthy interpersonal relationships. So this could be either considered attachment trauma from our caregiver, where we didn't feel we got the attachment needs met in our caregiving relationship. It can also be categorized as interpersonal trauma. So that would be relationship trauma, right? So we maybe have experienced bullying, or we were outcasted in our peer group, or we were neglected, or we had a bad breakup or a divorce. Like this is interpersonal trauma. It happens within the context of relationship, and this is where we want to start to focus some of our attention, because this is very valid trauma, and this impacts us greatly, and it impacts the inner child very, very much so. So we want to look at that and start to address that. So the next thing is how trauma impacts us as children. So the biggest thing, if trauma had a mantra, it would be, I am not safe, right? That's what trauma is telling us. You're not safe. The world around me isn't safe. So everything, when we're a child and we experience trauma, the first response we have is moving through the fight or flight or freeze or fawn, right? Which is kind of those 4 trauma responses, and all of them are an indicator that there's something unsafe in our environment. And then when we don't have safety to process this adverse event or experience, then it ends up being it ends up staying with us, right? And it gets encapsulated in our body, it gets put into our psyche, and we have an overall experience of the world as being unsafe. So this is one of the ways that trauma impacts us as children, is it creates an unsafe environment both within us and outside of us through our perceptions. The next one I've identified is premature ego formation. So I know that's a mouthful, and I want to explain what that means. So ego formation is something that happens to all human beings. We all develop the ego. The ego is essentially this I-centric voice inside of our heads. It's the narrator in our lives that talks to us, that we're able to listen to, that bitches and complains about people, that all that sort of thing. That's the I-centric part of us, right? Where we can become a separate sense of self, where we can have an I am Matt, I am a guy, I am, these sorts of things. So when we experience trauma, something interesting happens in our psyche. It's like we develop this I-centric sense of self a lot earlier than maybe anticipated. So if you experience trauma at say 5 years old, and you start to develop, your ego formation at this age, it's almost like you're getting the messaging that you have to accelerate your sense of self separate from that of the attached caregivers, right? So from your mom or your dad or whatever it might be. And it can create a sense of feeling like you're like controlling, right? So the ego later on in life, it's this part of us that creates separation between us and other, and we become rigid and inflexible and controlling when we have an overdeveloped ego. So premature ego formation means that our ego developed too early, and we developed this sense of self that was very characterized by our adverse event. So if the adverse event told us that we're not safe, then our ego is going to develop this mechanism around us telling us that it's not safe to be out here. So we have to really start to develop our connection to ourself in a way that is teaching us that the world around us isn't safe. I know that's a lot, so I don't want to go into too much detail on that. I could create a whole video just on premature ego formation and the ego structure itself. But if you have any questions further about that, you can leave them in the comments, and I'll try my best to address them. The next one I've identified would be like a heart closure. So we have chakras throughout our whole body, energy centers in our body, and our heart is the one of the most important. It's central. It connects the top and the bottom part of us. So when we have a heart closure, it means that something significant happened to us in our childhood where it was not safe to feel. It was not safe to be in our heart center. So we develop again the ego, and we go up into the mind, and we become very mind or egocentric. And this is just a strategy that we use. It's like you can think about heart closure as essentially like putting up walls or being guarded because you feel unsafe, right? So again, this is going to really impact our ability to be able to connect intimately in romantic relationships, in friendships. So people that have experienced childhood trauma and they haven't processed it are likely going to find themselves either on the anxious or the avoidant spectrum in relationships, and they're going to have a large fear of intimacy and or a large fear of abandonment. So this is why the inner child work can be really therapeutic in helping us heal our attachment styles, or I should say our insecure attachment styles, and make us better and more successful people in relationships. The third one is going to be dissociation. So dissociation is essentially where, when our heart closes, we go up into our mind, and it's called mental dissociation. So we learn to start to interact with the world through our mind, and we cut ourselves off from our body. So we unplug because feelings are felt in the body, right? So when we mentally dissociate, we go upwards. It's almost like this adaptive strategy or in early on to disconnect from the intense feelings in our body, and we become very cerebral. So, but where it's adaptive in our early years because it allows us to survive. It's a survival mechanism, right? And then in our later years, it becomes maladaptive because we're no longer feeling, right? And our feelings are messengers. They're showing us what needs we have, right? And when we are not connected to our needs, it's almost like we lose our compass. And when we don't have our compass, we don't know what we need, and then we end up making poor choices, and we end up surrounding ourselves with people that aren't going to meet our needs, and it becomes problematic. So we start living a very unfulfilled life when we're dissociated. And also, the thing about dissociation too is, let's say if you have an adverse experience when you're 5 years old, and you are dissociating from 5 all the way up till 30, well, you've had a very long period of time where you have not been able to develop emotional intelligence and emotional connectivity to yourself. So you're going to find yourself, again, being really emotionally immature in your relationships, or just emotionally immature in general, because we have no connection to our body, right? And a lot of times people think that we feel our feelings in our mind, because that's where we think about our feelings, but the feelings are actually felt in the body, in our felt sense, in our sensory, and our sensations of the emotion are experienced in the body. So we need to plug back in, right? That's going to be the biggest thing. Plugging back in is going to be huge. So I do have, this is the reason why I wrote this book, actually, called Be the Space. And it's a loving guide to creating inner space through present moment awareness, the wisdom to overcome suffering. This was my journey of moving from my head into my heart, because that's the work I did. So that all that work is conceptualized in that book. So if you're wanting to move away from dissociation and more towards being heart-centered and opening up your heart again, I highly recommend reading that book. And there's 16 tips at the back of the book on how I made this transformation happen, where I was able to become more embodied, right? That's what it's called. It's called embodiment, that's essentially the opposite of dissociation, is embodiment. And the book is all about that. So definitely recommend grabbing that. You can get it on Amazon if it feels in alignment to you. Okay, so let's get into the juicy stuff here. So I've come up with 18 ways that we can reparent ourselves. This is just from my own personal experience. This is from experience in doing this work with hundreds of people, really, over the course of my career doing inner child work. And I found that these are the most effective strategies, these 18 things that I've come up with. So I want to preface by saying that this is a lot. So I'm going to copy and paste this below, and in the caption, and maybe pick one or two things to focus on to start. Definitely do not try and take these all on. This is not a to-do list, because some of them won't even resonate with you. They might be, you might have already done them, or that you might not need to do them. So again, tune into yourself and say, what of these do I need? Which ones are going to be the most effective for me? And start there. Slow and steady wins the race in inner child work, and being really compassionate and slowing yourself down along the way. Right? This is life work. It's not a destination. You're not arriving to some sort of destination. So just be patient with yourself and enjoy the ride and have fun, because the discovery of the rediscovery of your innocence, your playfulness, your wholeness in inner child work is so beautiful, and I want you to revel in it. Enjoy the journey, because it's a really beautiful journey, and it's a really exciting process, right? And yes, there's grief, and yes, there's sadness, and you move through some dark stuff, but at the end of the day, like, it's a really beautiful process, and I guarantee you that you'll look back on it and feel good about the journey. So the first thing that I have for you guys is to personify your inner child. So when we have these experiences and they happen to us, we oftentimes get caught up in this mentality that we are our inner child still, and we are the woundedness. But as we grow up and we get older, there's a separateness between us and the things that happen to us, our memories, right? So when we personify the inner child, and by personify I mean to name it, right? To make it a separate entity from yourself. So my name is Matt, and my inner child is Matthew. So I refer to him in third person, because this allows me to become my higher self, so I can work with my younger self. Right? So the distinction and the separation between the two is a really beautiful way for you to be able to start working with this part of yourself. Okay? So that's the first one. The second one is to learn to feel your feelings first, and develop more emotional intelligence and maturity before you approach your inner child. Right? So we have to personify, and then we have to start engaging with our inner child. But if you're approaching your inner child from an emotionally immature place, it's going to be really, really hard for you to restore safety and trust, right? Because the inner child already doesn't trust you, because maybe you've been abandoning, maybe you've been numbing, dissociating, you've been avoiding having to be with this part of yourself. So, one of the biggest things I'm going to say is in my book is it's going to teach you how to plug back in, right? Once you plug back in and you're allowing yourself to feel, that's when you approach your inner child. Because if you're not feeling, Your inner child is loaded with feelings. It's waiting for you to plug back in to the inner child part of you so it can feel again, right? And if you approach it with an inability to feel, you're approaching it from the same place that you left it, right? So you want to make sure that you're developing this ability to be able to feel first and then approach the inner child, okay? Get clear about the unmet needs that you experienced as a child. This is huge, okay? Because trauma is all about unmet needs. Everything about trauma means that there was an unmet need, or one of your needs was violated. So when you are able to get clear about the unmet needs you experienced as a child, you're going to be able to start to tend to those needs. Because if you had an unmet need as a child, likely this is going to be a foundational part of who you are as an adult, and it's going to be something you yearn for, right? So an example of this is when I was a child, I was very emotional and I did not feel very understood and heard as a child. And as an adult, if I'm ever in a setting where, let's say in a romantic relationship where I'm, spilling my guts and my partner's on his phone and not listening, it's going to trigger me very much. So being heard is a need I have, and when it goes unmet, I become very activated, and I almost revert back into my wounded inner child energy, and I got to be really mindful of that in relationships. So number 4, we need to be there for ourselves now in the ways that we needed in childhood but didn't receive. Okay, so this usually happens through words and actions. Those are the 2 ways. So we either needed to hear something from our parents or teachers or whatever, or we needed them to do something, and those things never got done, right? And we need to start to learn ways to meet those needs for ourselves. And this might be moving through some of the victim energy. It might be taking responsibility, whatever that might look like, but you need to get to an energy where you can start to tend to your own needs, right? That's going to be a big part of this work, because again, it's about growing up. We have to grow up from this part of ourselves that we feel stuck in, and we need to be able to be there for the part of us that we have left behind, right? The 5th one, don't just speak affirmations from your mind. The thing about affirmations, like when I use affirmations all the time, and for so long they didn't stick. And this is a big criticism I hear on affirmations or mantras from people, is they're like, it just doesn't feel like it does anything. But it's because let's use an example of gratitude, right? If you use gratitude as an intellectual concept, it doesn't take, because gratitude isn't an intellectual concept. It is a felt sense. We feel gratitude. It's a feeling. So where do we want to direct the affirmation when we're trying to cultivate gratitude? We want to draw it down into the place it's meant to be felt, right? Gratitude is heart-centeredness. So whenever you're giving an affirmation to yourself, try to speak downward, right, to your body. And be with your body. Place your hand on the place that you want the affirmation to go, and try your best to feel it, right? And if you're really dissociated and you've been spending a lot of your time in your mind, this might be why your affirmations aren't taking. So again, plugging yourself in, learning how to feel, connecting, developing a new relationship with your body is going to be a big, big part of this journey. Huge, probably the biggest, okay? Number 6, consistency is the key to developing trust. So if you think about how your trust was breached, right, or how people breach our trust, is they do things over time that aren't inconsistent or congruence with us, right? So that's what we've done to our inner child. We've abandoned them for relationships or for connection or for approval, whatever it might be. So our inner child is really wounded, and it feels very mistrusting of us, right? So do not approach your inner child if you're a hot mess. Okay, don't begin your inner child work when you are emotionally dysregulated. This is going to be a process, and you can, like, throughout the process of inner child work, you can become emotionally dysregulated. That's completely okay. But if you're emotionally dysregulated in the moment and you're trying to work with your inner child, it's not going to work, because this is a part of yourself that doesn't trust you. Right? When we say we don't trust ourselves, it's because we have this entity within us that doesn't trust us, because we've abandoned it and we've left it out to dry, right? So we want to make sure that we are being consistent with our inner child and showing up for it in these consistent ways throughout the process. Number 7 is going to be to prime the ego. We want to give the ego a reason to surrender, right? So when we're doing ego work, which is essentially a part of inner child work, we want to. The ego is inflexible, it's rigid, it's controlling. So we need to let go. We need to surrender, right? So we're essentially surrendering our mind to which is a part of our mind is our ego. We're essentially surrendering that to our heart and our soul, right? Saying, okay, I've done enough controlling, I've been inflexible enough, I'm willing to let go and let the universe or whatever you believe in kind of guide me a little bit along the way. So we need to prime the ego by saying, okay, give it reasons to want to surrender, right? Make a list of benefits of surrendering. Like how can becoming more free and liberated, less controlling, less rigid, more flexible, how can those things benefit your life? Make that list in your journal and use that whenever you're feeling like your ego is coming online again and trying to prevent you from trusting or from letting go. And that's going to be a big part of this. The ego is going to be one of the biggest barriers you'll come up against in this work because it's been taught in an adaptive way in our early years to defend us from seeing life and reality the way that it's meant to be perceived, and it tricks us. And that's when it becomes maladaptive, because it's now tricking us from thinking people aren't safe, from thinking that we can't be in relationships, from thinking that I can't heal, right? The ego quickly becomes maladaptive, just the same way as dissociation does. Number 8, advocate for your needs. Advocate for your needs to be met in your relationships. This goes with all your relationships. It could be your parental relationships. It could be your platonic, your romantic, whatever they might be. Your needs matter, right? And when we start to advocate for our needs to be met, we start to cultivate worthiness. And worthiness is a place that we're able to do some really beautiful work when we feel more worthy. So once you identify what your needs are, find ways to advocate for those needs to be met in your relationships. That might look like setting boundaries. Both personal and relational boundaries need to be set in order for us to get our needs met, okay? Number 9, respect your personal boundaries. So on this journey, you're going to come up against a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting people testing you, this and that. So and you testing yourself, right? If one of your personal boundaries is to show up for your inner child every day and check in for 5 or 10 minutes and be with that place in you and maybe do a meditation around it, and you do it for 3 or 4 days straight, you're feeling good, and then all of a sudden you start to taper off, that's not respecting your personal boundaries. It's not being consistent. Right? So when you have personal boundaries set in place, make sure that you follow them and you adhere to them, and you also make sure that you're holding people accountable to respecting your boundaries as well. Number 10, rebuild trust with your inner child by keeping promises to yourself. This is huge. If you are an anxious attacher, you are codependent, you have a propensity to abandon yourself, this is key, okay? Because how can you rebuild trust if you're not keeping promises to yourself? So these last 3 are all really connected, right? Advocating for your needs in relationships, respect your personal boundaries, and rebuild trust with your inner child by keeping promises to yourself. It's all about consistency, right? We need to make sure that we're doing this in a consistent way in order for us to get our needs met. So keeping promises to yourself, don't forget that one. That one's huge. Number 11, practice self-validation of your emotions, right? Emotional validation is something that a lot of us as sensitives and empaths did not receive very much as children, because we likely needed it more than other kids. And it's really hard for parents to know how to emotionally validate in the first place, but how to emotionally validate a highly sensitive, empathic child is almost impossible. So it's really important that we learn this skill now, right? So when I'm having an emotional experience, if I'm always looking to everyone else to validate my experience, I'm giving away my power, right? So we want to draw our power back in, and we want to learn how to do this for ourselves. So what I do with myself is I sit with myself and I ask myself, when I'm feeling emotions bubbling up, I say, is there an emotion that would like to be felt right now? What emotion wants to be felt right now? And I close my eyes and I go inward and I do a bit of a scan and I be with myself. And once I locate what that emotion is, sometimes I don't even know what the emotion is. I just label it as, oh wow, I've got a heat in my face, or my chest feels tight, or whatever. Then I validate myself for it. It's okay to feel this. It's okay to feel anger. It's okay to feel these things, and I'm there for myself. No, inner child work is no different than how you would support your best friend if they were hurting, or how you would support, let's say, a 5-year-old child that was in pain, right? This is how you need to start interacting with yourself, right? Lots of self-compassion, because this is what we didn't receive in the time in our youth and our childhood when we needed it, right? Is compassion. So we need to learn how to give ourself compassion, okay? And that usually happens in the form of validation, self-validation. All right, journaling about your thoughts and feelings. So the thing I love about journaling is it's a slowed down thinking. It's a slowed down feeling. You're being with it with a pen in your hand and paper. So I think journaling is one of the most effective ways to do inner child work and to be with ourselves, because we slow down the process. And when we are so mentally dissociated, it's so hard to slow down. Everything is so sped up because we're in our mind, right? The speed of the mind and the speed of the heart are two completely different speeds. So when we slow down this process through journaling, you'll find you'll get a lot out of it. So just simply journaling about your thoughts and feelings. For some it might be structured, for some it might be bullet points, for some it might be stream of consciousness journaling, just scribbling down whatever, right? This is all therapeutic. It's all has value, so don't judge the process either. Number 13, practice a lot of self-care. Okay. Self-care practices are huge, and I think if you look at sensitives and empaths, like we need both reactive and proactive self-care practices. And reactive is, oh shit, something's happening in this moment, I need to tend to myself right now. I need to remove myself from whatever's stimulating me, and I need to be there for myself right now, right? Proactive self-care is going to be, how can I structure my life in a way that I am going to thrive, right? So having both of these practices is going to be really, really essential. And if you're not quite sure on how to practice self-care, this is just simply doing things that nurture you, mind, body, and spirit. What are things that you can do that nurture you? What do you love to do that makes your heart sing? Do those things, because they will help you connect to this part of you that is playful and in joy. And this is what the inner child is meant to do. This is what it was created to do. So we need to learn ways that we can care for ourselves, and doing it in a playful way is important. Number 14, practice self-holding or hugging. So this is all about nervous system regulation. I have a ton of great content on my Instagram on both co-regulation and self-regulation. So head on over to my Instagram and you'll find a lot of tips on there on how to do self-regulation and co-regulation for your nervous system. But self-holding is essentially just holding your arms and squeezing, giving yourself pressure. Hugging other people can be a really great way to regulate the nervous system. Self-massage, containment, so holding your head tightly. These are different things that are going to help with regulating the nervous system when it becomes activated, okay? Number 15, I kind of spoke about this one already, but do things that bring you joy and allow you to be playful, right? Playfulness is massive. And you know what? It's so interesting how domestication into adulthood tells us that playfulness is immaturity, right? Those are synonyms in adulthood. And I think it's ridiculous, because, being silly, being goofy, being playful, there is space in everyone's life for that. And I really invite you to bring that into your life more, because being goofy and silly and playful, your inner child will be like, wow, who is this person, right? This feels really good. And it allows there to be a softness of energy inside of you when you allow yourself to be more playful. Okay, these last three are really important. These were big things for me on my journey. So number 16 is pictures and home videos. So I have a whole bunch. I'll show you guys these. So I have Matt when he was, I don't know, probably 9, Matt when he was probably 8, And I have all of them, all my childhood pictures. They all lay out on my shrine, and I love them. I love them every day, and I send love to these parts of me. So getting pictures of you when you were a child, going through old photo albums, it can stir up a lot of emotions, and that's the emotions that you need to be with. That's the emotions you need to feel. Okay, so this is a really big one as far as reconnection. If you have home videos of yourself when you were younger, I recommend watching these home videos, and again, noticing from an embodied place. Be with your body when you're watching these videos and notice the feelings that are trying to move. If you can, watch them alone, because some stuff might come up, and if you have shame around experiencing emotions with others present, it might keep you repressed, right? So doing it alone might be benefit. Number 17, so forgiveness of parents and trusting that they did the best they could with what they knew at the time. This is a heavy one. This is a big one for a lot of people, okay? And, as sensitives and empaths, I said this earlier, we are complex creatures. We're very complex creatures. And, I do the work right now of teaching people how to emotionally regulate themselves. It feels impossible sometimes. It's very difficult work. So I have cut my parents major slack because emotion regulation is such a difficult thing. And back in the day when my parents were raising me, there was no literature out about emotion regulation. There was nothing, right? So it's like my parents truly did the best they could with what they knew at the time. And I think, when we can start to forgive the wrongdoings that were done to us, and we can connect with that victim energy and then move through that victim energy into taking responsibility, which is important, by the way. We don't want to just hop from inner child woundedness over to taking responsibility. We need to feel the victim energy. We need to be with that energy. We need to go through the energy of being angry and blaming our parents, because that's part of the journey, right? It's just part of the journey. And but I noticed for me, once I started forgiving my parents, something freed up inside of me. My heart started opening again, and it was from that place of heart openness that I was able to connect with my inner child. So forgiveness for parents is huge. This is a major undertaking. I did a lot of deep work in this space, and I worked with coaches and therapists for years. And I finally, just in the last year, I met with my parents, each of them separately, and I wrote down in my journal 3 lists. And I think it was something like, what am I angry about them at, what do I love about them, and how can I take responsibility for myself. And that's the whole point of this, was how can I take responsibility for my own emotions and my own feelings and my own experiences without blaming, right? Because when we're blaming, we're not able to be with the feelings that we need to be with in order to heal, right? We're making other people responsible for our feelings, so we're stuck in the hamster wheel, right? So this is just such a big one. I can't emphasize it enough, because that frees up all that energy of resentment and anger and blame towards your parents, and it frees all that energy up for you to do the real work that needs to be done, which is being with you and taking responsibility for your stuff. Okay. Number 18 is celebrating all the wins along the way. Okay, so many of us, we get caught on this journey of personal development where it's all just about, trudging along, doing the work. I want to improve. Well, when do we get to stop or pause the pursuit of improvement and just be improved, right? So celebrate all the wins along the way. Look back and see how far you've come. This is really important stuff, right? So make sure that you take time each week to focus on things you're grateful for, on all the little small accomplishments, and make like an appreciation board. Like, what do I appreciate about what I accomplished this week, right? Even if it's something really small, it's still really important for you to acknowledge it. 2 journaling prompts that I think could be really helpful for you to start off some of this work is, what needs went unmet for me as a child, and how am I getting this need met now? Okay, super important to focus on that. Make a list of the needs that went unmet for you, and then look at how you're getting these needs met now. And you may be doing them in dysfunctional ways. You may be numbing out and not getting your needs met, and this is going to be a big indicator of the quality of your life, essentially. So get really clear on this, and that will lead you to a whole bunch of gems. And for people who love journaling, again, on my Inspired to Be Authentic YouTube or Instagram page, I do journal prompts every week. So come on board and join the community over there, and we can do some journaling together. Okay, so now I want to hear from you. I want you to share in the comments below, what was the main unmet need you faced as a child? So for me, it was I didn't feel heard or understood as a child. So my need for feeling heard and understanding was not there. So this has impacted me in a great way. I want to know from you, what was your main unmet need that you faced as a child, and how is that showing up for you? So let me know in the comments below. Thank you again for tuning into another video, and we will catch you around the community. Ciao.